Welcome to Godless and Grounded.
There comes a point in life where a person stops and asks a simple question. What makes a belief true? Is it the fact that many people follow it? Or is it the way that belief fits with logic, reality, and observed evidence? When we look at religious claims in general, we are asked to accept a world that is very different from the world we can verify with our senses. Islam, like all other religions, asks us to believe in many things that sound extraordinary. And when we place these ideas next to what we know from science history and human psychology, they begin to look less like deep truths and more like stories that were created in a very different time. The first claim is the story of a winged creature that carries a man into the sky and takes him on a night journey from one land to another and then raises him through multiple layers of heaven. The creature is said to be something between a horse and a mule with wings. Imagine hearing this story for the first time outside of a religious context. If someone today claimed a man rode a flying animal into space and then visited 7 layers of the universe, we would see it the same way we see myths from ancient Greece. It would feel like a legend, not a historical fact. Yet when told through religion, it is treated as literal, unquestionable truth. This shows how the authority of religion changes how people evaluate claims. The moment something is labeled sacred, the usual standards of evidence and reason are set aside. Another belief is that there is an unseen world full of invisible beings called jinn. These beings are said to be made of smokeless fire, yet they have families, they eat, they speak, they form tribes, they feel jealousy, and they can supposedly influence human thoughts. If we imagine for a second what smokeless fire even means in a physical sense, we see no scientific definition for such a material. Fire is a reaction that produces heat and light. To say something is made of fire, but leaves no trace, no heat, no light, and yet functions like a living organism, does not match any biological or physical model. This belief makes sense only in a world where humans explained unknown mental experiences, dreams, anxiety, or illness, by attributing them to spirits. But today, when psychology, neurology, and medical science explain these experiences, we no longer need spirits as the cause. There is also the belief that 2 invisible angels sit with every human at all times, recording every thought and action. One angel writes the good deeds and the other writes the bad deeds. If we think honestly, this idea is less about actual angels and more about controlling human behavior through constant internal surveillance. The message is clear. You are always being watched, so act obedient. This resembles the psychological strategy of an authority that wants full control, not the logic of an all-knowing divine being. If a deity is truly all-knowing, then it does not require angels to record anything. The belief only makes sense in a time when writing was rare and record-keeping was seen as a sacred act. Then there is the belief that paradise is a place where physical desires continue forever. A garden where people receive endless food, pleasure, and companions. Rivers of milk, honey, and wine flowing like streams. It is interesting that the reward for eternal goodness is essentially described as a luxurious ancient Middle Eastern royal banquet. If a religion truly came from a divine source outside of time and culture, why would the supposed perfect paradise look exactly like the dream of a 7th century desert society? Why would the highest spiritual reward be physical pleasure? This suggests that paradise was imagined by humans based on what humans at that time considered happiness. Another belief says that everything a human will ever do was already decided by the divine before they were born. Yet the same belief system says humans will be judged and rewarded or punished for their choices. Here we see a direct contradiction. If everything is predetermined, then judgment becomes meaningless. Punishment would be unjust because the individual had no freedom to choose. Many believers try to solve this by saying human free will and divine predestination coexist in some mysterious way. But when examined with simple logic, both cannot be true at the same time. A choice cannot be both free and predetermined. A further claim is that a moon once split into 2 separate parts and then returned to its original form. If such a cosmic event had actually occurred, it would have been observed, recorded, and written about by civilizations across the world. The sky was the most watched phenomenon in ancient times. Civilizations were expert astronomers long before telescopes. Yet there is no record outside of Islamic tradition. No Indian, Persian, Chinese, or Greek astronomer ever documented such an event. A miracle that leaves no witnesses outside of the followers of the belief is indistinguishable from a story told to inspire devotion. We also hear about the existence of magic and the evil eye as real forces. Many people in Muslim societies attribute sickness, failure, or emotional distress to someone casting an evil influence on them. But what we see in reality is that these experiences are better explained by stress, genetics, environment, and psychology. The belief in magic remains strong in societies where scientific thinking is not encouraged. It becomes a way to avoid facing real causes. If we blame unseen forces, we do not have to change anything in our lives. There is also the claim that written scripture has been perfectly preserved without any alteration, but history shows that texts change whenever they are copied by hand across centuries. Linguistic evolution, cultural influence, and oral tradition all change meaning over time. No text transmitted by humans can remain unchanged for over 1,000 years. And even the existence of many different recitations, pronunciations, and interpretations shows that what is called perfect preservation is more of an idea than a historical fact. When we listen to these beliefs carefully, we can see something clear. None of these claims are evil. They are not malicious. They are simply the products of a world that did not have the scientific knowledge or technological understanding we have today. People at that time did not know how the brain works, so they imagined invisible spirits. They did not understand astronomy, so they imagined heavens layered above the sky. They did not know psychology, so they imagined angels writing thoughts. They did not know how to study disease, so they imagined magic. The beliefs are not shameful. They are simply outdated. Yet many people today still hold them as unquestionable truths because they were taught to believe before learning how to evaluate. Faith came first. Thought came later. And when faith is given a foundation before reason, it becomes difficult to question. Another belief often presented is that humans are born in a state of complete purity, yet at the same time they are under constant threat of being influenced by an external evil being known as Shaitan. The idea suggests that a powerful invisible force dedicated entirely to misleading humans spends every moment attempting to draw them away from obedience. When examined carefully, we see that this belief functions as a way to explain why people sometimes behave in ways that differ from expectations. Instead of recognizing that human behavior comes from internal psychology, trauma, environment, social conditioning, or personal difficulty, the influence is externalized onto a symbolic figure. This removes personal responsibility from actions by attributing them to a cosmic conflict rather than human complexity. It also creates a worldview where life is not simply life but a battlefield of unseen forces. This can make normal struggles appear dramatic or frightening, which strengthens emotional attachment to religion. There is also the belief that a book written in a single historical period contains all knowledge needed for eternity. This assumes that moral, social, and intellectual needs of humanity will never change. But history shows that societies evolve. What was normal thousands of years ago may be considered harmful or unjust today. Ancient laws about war, inheritance, women, slavery, and punishment reflect the values of the time they came from. If a text claims to be universal and final, then it must be flexible enough to grow with humanity. However, when a text is treated as untouchable even when its instructions no longer match the needs of the present, tension is created between tradition and progress. This leads to conflict within societies, where some push to maintain ancient laws, exactly as written, while others push for reform. The belief that one time period had perfect timeless wisdom prevents the natural evolution of human ethics. Another concept that raises questions is the belief that prayer changes destiny. It is claimed that a divine being has already written every detail of every life. Yet at the same time, a person is told to ask for protection, success, or healing through prayer. If destiny is truly fixed, prayer cannot influence it. If prayer can influence it, then destiny is not fixed. Many people resolve this contradiction by refusing to examine it closely. They are told that human logic cannot understand divine complexity. But if a belief system cannot withstand simple reasoning, then questioning is not the problem. The problem is the belief system itself. The purpose of prayer in many cases is emotional comfort. It helps people feel less alone in times of fear. It provides a sense of hope. But comfort does not prove truth. Emotional relief is not evidence. In many religious settings, the act of asking for proof or clarity is seen as weakness of faith or spiritual corruption. This creates a mental environment where the believer is trained to distrust their own reasoning. Curiosity becomes something dangerous. The individual learns to silence their own questions out of fear rather than seek understanding. When a belief is true, it can stand on evidence and open examination. When a belief must protect itself from questions in order to survive, that reveals something important. The fear of questioning is actually the fear that the answers may not support the belief. A belief that demands obedience without examination is a belief built on control, not truth. As we move further into the examination of these beliefs, something very important becomes clear. Most of these ideas were created to answer questions that early human societies were not yet able to understand. Before science, before psychology, before medicine, before astronomy, humans had no reliable method to explain existence, so they created stories that helped them feel less uncertain and less afraid. These stories did not come from malice. They came from a deep emotional need for comfort and structure. The problem arises when these ancient explanations are still treated as literal truth in a world where we now have more accurate knowledge. What once served as myth and metaphor becomes treated as absolute reality, and when that happens, reason becomes secondary to belief. Take, for example, the belief that the universe was created in a very short span of time, and that everything in it was shaped purposely and perfectly from the start. This idea assumes that complexity must come from intention. But we now know from evolutionary biology and cosmology that complexity emerges gradually through natural processes. The universe changes over billions of years. Stars are born and die. Planets form and are destroyed. Life evolves through variation and adaptation. No matter how one feels emotionally about the idea of a purposeful creation, the evidence around us shows a universe that does not match the narrative of instant divine formation. Yet many continue to hold the ancient belief not because it is supported by evidence, but because it is tied to identity, community, and inherited tradition. When belief is linked to belonging, truth becomes secondary to loyalty. Another belief that raises questions is the idea of eternal punishment for finite actions. The doctrine says that if a person does not believe in a particular religious system, they will suffer forever after death. Forever is a long time. It is not 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years or even 1,000,000,000 years. It is without end. The punishment never stops. Yet the actions that determine this eternal outcome occur within a short human lifespan. When looked at logically, eternal punishment for temporary mistakes is the definition of injustice. If a parent punished a child endlessly for one wrong decision, we would call that cruelty. Yet when the same concept is placed in a religious framework, people are told it is fairness. They are told to accept it without question. This is not moral reasoning, it is fear conditioning. There is also the belief in miracles as proof of truth. A miracle is something that breaks the laws of nature. But if the laws of nature can be broken at any time, then they are not laws. They are merely patterns. A law is something that remains constant because it is based on the structure of reality. If miracles were common or repeatable, they could be studied and measured. But miracles occur only in stories, memories, or emotional testimonies. None of these forms of evidence meet the standards of verification. A claim is only as strong as the method used to evaluate it. When a belief relies on events that leave no trace, no witnesses, no physical evidence, and cannot be repeated, it belongs to the realm of storytelling, not reality. Another striking belief is the idea that morality comes only from Scripture. The claim suggests that without religious instruction, humans would not know the difference between right and wrong. But history shows that compassion, cooperation, and empathy existed long before organized religion. Human beings are social creatures. We understand fairness because we live in groups. We understand harm because we can feel pain. We understand kindness because we desire care. Morality is not handed down from the sky. It grows from human experience. If morality truly came only from religion, then people who do not follow religion would be cruel and immoral. Yet this is not what we see. There are kind atheists, kind agnostics, kind secular individuals across the world. Morality is a human quality, not a religious gift. Another belief deserving reflection is the idea that modesty and moral purity are linked to the covering of the body. This concept implies that the value of a person is tied to how much of their physical form is hidden. But the human body is natural. Shame around the body is not inherent. It is taught. When societies teach that the sight of a human body is dangerous, they create guilt around something that should be neutral. This can create deep psychological struggles, especially in young minds. People learn to fear their own nature. The belief that morality is tied to clothing is cultural, not universal. Different societies across history have expressed modesty in different ways. The belief that one specific model of dress is divine truth reflects the values of the time and place where the belief originated, not a universal moral law. We also see the belief that obedience itself is virtue. The idea teaches that the highest form of goodness is submission. submission to religious authority, submission to divine will, submission to tradition. But obedience without understanding is not morality. It is compliance. True moral action comes from thinking, reflecting, and choosing what is right based on empathy and reason. When individuals are told that questioning is wrong and that obedience is the path to virtue, then morality becomes the act of silence, not the act of understanding. A person who follows commands without reflection is not acting from goodness but from fear or habit. A moral person is one who can explain their actions through reason and compassion, not one who obeys simply because they were told to. There is also the belief that suffering in life is a test. The idea says that every pain, every loss, every injustice is given by a divine being as a challenge. But when we look at the world, we see natural suffering that does not discriminate. Illness, disaster, and death occur without regard to belief or behavior. Children suffer. Animals suffer. Entire populations suffer because of environmental or political circumstances beyond their control. To call all suffering a test requires assuming that pain is deliberately imposed. This belief may bring emotional comfort to some, but it also discourages efforts to change the world. If suffering is sacred, then action becomes interference. In this way, the belief can prevent progress rather than inspire it. Another related belief is that everything happens for a reason. While the idea may feel reassuring, it removes human responsibility to create meaning. Some events do not have inherent purpose. Meaning is something that humans create through reflection and effort. If all events were pre-planned by an external force, then human creativity and moral responsibility would have no real significance. Life would simply unfold according to a script. Yet we know from experience that choices matter. Actions influence outcomes. Effort changes circumstances. Human agency is real. To deny that is to deny one of the most fundamental aspects of being alive. Then there is the belief that religious truth is closed and final, that no new understanding is needed, that everything important has already been revealed. But knowledge is always expanding. Human understanding deepens over time. If we look at history, every century offers new insights. Medicine, ethics, culture, law, science, technology, and philosophy continue evolving. A belief system that refuses to evolve gradually falls into conflict with the world around it. Instead of guiding progress, it resists it. What once felt sacred becomes a barrier to growth, and when a belief system values its own preservation more than the well-being of individuals and communities, then it ceases to be a source of wisdom and becomes a source of restriction. Now we return to the central point. These beliefs are not flaws in human nature. They are reflections of the human attempt to find meaning. But when we have better tools for understanding reality, and we still hold on to beliefs that contradict evidence and reason, we create unnecessary tension. The purpose of thinking is not to destroy meaning, but to refine it. Truth does not fear questions. Truth does not hide from examination. Truth does not require silence. If a belief can survive careful reasoning, then it is strong. If it cannot, then it requires re-evaluation. The world we live in now offers knowledge and insight that could not have existed in the past. We can understand the universe without myths. We can understand the mind without spirits. We can understand morality without commandments. Our task is simply to think clearly and honestly, to ask questions without fear, to choose understanding over assumption, to choose truth over tradition. When thought is free, the mind becomes a horizon. In the end, the most meaningful step a person can take is simply to allow themselves to think without fear. Not to reject everything, and not to accept everything, but to look honestly at what aligns with reality and what does not. The mind is not given to us for decoration. It exists to question, to analyze, and to understand.